Today, Big Sound Small Town is in North Wilkesboro at the MerleFest Festival, and I'm here with B. Towns. If you've been to this festival very often, it's a name that you know, and I'm going to get B to tell us what he knows about it. All right, musically, this didn't really start out to be a festival so much as it did a fundraiser. Is that correct?
Sandy, MerleFest began and continues to be a fundraiser.
Oh, okay.
The idea for MerleFest, simply from my perspective as a horticulture teacher in 1987, I had designed a master plan for the campus gardens here for instructional purposes. One of those gardens was to be a garden for the senses, to appeal to the visually impaired. And one of my adult students told me one night after class that she knew somebody who knew Doc Watson. And she introduced me to Bill Young, and Bill took me up to see Doc and Rosalie Watson, and I proposed to them that we have a concert in the Walker Center,
Right.
which is our 1,100-seat performing arts center here on the Wilkes Community College campus. And we would name the garden for him. And he just slapped me on the knee, like he always did, and said, "I'd love to do that, but I want you to name it in memory of my son, the late Eddie Merle Watson, who had died on a tractor accident a couple of years earlier." So yes, it was started to be a fundraiser for the gardens, but it continues to be a fundraiser not only for the gardens here at Wilkes Community College, but some 47 nonprofit clubs and organizations within the college community and the larger Wilkesboro area.
That's great. Are you still a part of the garden? I know you're retired. I know you're trying to back away from stuff, but I was just curious.
I still consider that the epicenter of MerleFest,
It's great.
the garden. So I typically begin any tour there because that's the roots of it. That's where the seed was planted. And if you go to the garden, the permanent parts, Sandy, are the sculptured walls.
Yeah.
And one of those walls has an oak tree, the white oak tree. And the reason for that is because that was what Rosalie told me was Merle's favorite tree. So I commissioned the artist to put the white oak into that brick sculptured wall.
I've wondered about that before.
And that was part of the reason for the permanence. And then we have nature's alphabet to either side of it, A, armadillo, disease, zebra. And those are permanent parts of the garden. So, yes, I go back to the garden regularly. And gardens change, the plant material dies and replaced, but the permanence is right there in the plaque for Merle and in that sculptured wall. And then the last wall we built is the music wall, where Doc and Merle are center and the music instruments are on either side. And actually a musician designed that for us, and he had a hobby of doing the brick sculpture. But I'll never forget, Sandy, looking back on it, I got to take Doc to see the wall, and by seeing, I would take his hand and place it on it, and I didn't tell him anything, and he just felt along, and then he chuckled, and he said, "That's me."
Oh, that's great.
And then he reached the other one, and he said, "And that's Merle."
That's
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
That is.
But back to the beginnings, you were talking about the concert. I came back all excited, told my boss here and the president of the college, I had Doc Watson coming, we're going to do a concert. And they said, "When?"
Excuse me.
Can edit that out. And I said, "Well, next month." This is in the fall of 1987. And he said, well, have you checked with Bud Mays up at the Walker Center? I said, well, no, I didn't know I needed to. So I go up to see Bud Mays, and he says, well, you can't do that. We got something on the calendar.
Oh.
So I went back to Bill Young, and I said, Bill, you can't do it. He said, well, you're going to have to go tell Doc. So I went back up, met with Doc and Rosalie. They're sitting in the living room. And I'll never forget, Rosalie was sitting right beside me. And I said, they've got something booked down there. We can't do it. And this is her exact words, she said, don't you fret, young'un. You can put it off till spring, and you can have a festival. Yeah. You know what I asked her, Sandy? I said, what is a festival?
Oh, that's great.
You got to think about this. My paradigm was a horticulture instructor.
Right.
And so from the fall of 87 to the spring of 88, it evolved to over 100 musicians volunteering their time to come and performing not only in the Walker Center, but also we had a little workshop planned in the Pitt Auditorium.
Right.
And at that time, pre-internet, all the tickets were sold by people mailing checks in from all over the country or calling from somewhere and buying a ticket. And I went up one day, I was always just going by and checking between classes, see what was going on. And Kathy Gray told me, she said, we've sold all the tickets. Well, that had never happened. The Walker Center had only been open a couple of years, and they never filled it up. And so I came back down, and so she's still opening mail with checks in it. And what are we going to do? And Doc had always told me, he said, Cliff Miller will take care of the sound. So don't worry about that. Well, this was probably February before the April 30th, May 1st, 1988, first festival. And Cliff said, well, Doc wanted me to come up here and see what we need to do. And so we went to the Walker Center, and there was no sound system.
No.
So he'd played music with Doc and Merle, and so he brought a sound system, said he'd bring a sound system. And I explained to him, I said, I've sold all the tickets. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, let's look around. Well, at that time, what you know today is the Watson Theater, MerleFest grounds, was a swamp. And we didn't own it. Didn't own most of that land. But I had just recently moved a cabin, a 200-year-old cabin, to be part of the gardens.
Okay.
And Cliff looked at that and he said, we just move it out here. Well, that excited me.
Yeah.
I went back to see my boss, the president of the college, and they said, you are crazy. You sold out the Walker Center. Count your blessings, and that's it. And so I thought, man, okay, that's the way it'll be. Well, the next day, my boss said, now, you really think you need to do that? Bill Davis was my boss at the time. He was director of development. And I said, well, it just seems like it makes sense. He said, well, go on and do it. Don't worry about the boss, the president. Mm-hmm. He said, you do what you think you need to do. So if you look back at that very first poster, it's got the word sold out at the top of part of it. And at the bottom, expanded. Because then we didn't have all these computers and graphics. Nancy Watson was actually, Doc's daughter, was doing the poster, cutting letters out and putting a block of letters on there to run 100 posters.
Sure.
And so we had already got that much done. So we put sold out right up there at the top and then added. And to this day, I refuse to use the word sold out because that haunted us for the next 2 months. I was going out with Doc where he was playing on the weekends, and we were announcing about the festival. And we were talking about it being expanded, but the word sold out stood out bigger.
Oh, yeah, I can see.
So we wound up selling about an equal number of tickets for the outdoors Saturday and Sunday as we did indoors. So looking back on it, within 3 or 4 months, we went from a one-man, one-night concert to a 2-day, 3-stage, or 2-stage and a workshop
Right.
festival.
That's really amazing.
So when people talk to me about the change in MerleFest, how do I see the change? MerleFest changed from its inception almost daily, and it's evolved now to over a dozen stages and 70, 80,000 people.
I mean, I've watched it. I came to the first one. I've watched it evolve over the years to a premier festival. I mean, it is one of America's premier festivals.
And I'm proud to say that we call it Americana, but Doc always called it traditional plus,
Yeah, that's a good
meaning
term.
traditional music plus whatever he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that
Which is what he did.
And that gave me a license to steal in terms of presenting different types of artists. But we
I can edit this.
we were in a situation where some people in Nashville were talking about the different genres of music. They were talking about the different genres of music.
Let me pause.